A lot of injury prevention, weight training stuff as well, and you'll learn more about that science today. So Csaba's going to go first, then I'll talk, and then we'll take some questions and answers. So, but you can probably interrupt anytime you have a question, and we'll entertain that. So let me introduce you to Csaba and Lucas.
Hi guys, thank you for coming. We are streaming this presentation live as well on YouTube. So if you want to rewatch it, just go on YouTube and it will be available for you as well. So anyone who's watching us online, welcome. And if there's a possibility to...
You can turn it off.
Yeah, to turn that off, that would be lovely. Yeah, that looks great. Okay, so let me jump right into it. Okay, so take a look at these guys. I created this sticky pad here. There's 100 pages on this sticky pad. 100 pages. Every single page represents 2,000 years. 2,000 years. Homo sapiens sapiens, who we are, existed for this long. Okay, this is our history. 2,000 years, every single page. This one page is, when Jesus was born. This is basically where Egypt was, right? I wanted you guys to have a visual understanding how little of our history we are looking at. So what I'm interested in is this. Why did we evolve into what we are? And that's where I want to start. So let's have some fun and just play with this idea what I'm going to throw at you. Okay, don't think about it too much, just go with it and have fun with it. So let's go on a time travel together, okay? Let's think that this is 72,000 AD right now, Africa. You're a Homo sapiens sapiens already, and you're 6 hours into a hunt. And you are tracing and tracking down a kudu, which is a large antelope. And you're getting very close to it. You know that the animal is fatiguing, and you're getting ready to make the final push. And at this point, after 6 hours tracking it, you know this animal really well. Because every single footprint is helping you to know better this animal. You know exactly if they're hungry, you know if it's thirsty, you know if it's happy, you know if it has a tired neck because it's carrying a large set of horns. You know every single thing about this animal. And you're getting closer and closer. And you know that you're going to be able to push yourself to your limits. And when you push yourself to your limits, there's no other mammal who can possibly keep up with you, because you are the most endurance, you have the best endurance capability from all mammals that exist. So you know, as long as you pay attention to yourself and you're keeping a nice balance in your inner world and you don't get dehydrated and you don't push yourself too hard, there's no other animal that can possibly keep up with you. So you keep going at it, you keep going at it. You also pay attention to your outer environment. Because you and I here today, you might not really pay attention when you take a breath. But when you're out in nature, you used to pay attention to every single breath you took. Because every breath came with a bunch of information into your brain. You knew that if there was any other animals around, you were listening continuously for every single bird alarm you were aware, because you knew where the animal you were hunting was because of the bird alarm also, and also you knew if there was other predators around. So you were tracking, you're getting closer and closer and closer, and with your sheer physical endurance, you were able to exhaust this animal to the point where it heart gave up. And that's how you hunted back then, because you had no tools yet that you took with you on the hunt. So you had your body, that's it, and that's all. And you developed this so-called persistent hunting. Persistent hunting. So let's go a little bit closer to our present time. Let's say 30,000 years ago, AD, Australia. 8 Aboriginal Australians left in a muddy seaside footprints, and those fossilized. We found these footprints in 2006. Now what's interesting about these guys is that then there were 8 of them, and they were running at a pretty unbelievable pace. They were running so fast that from the analysis of the footprints, we were able to determine that one of them was running 23 miles per hour. Now that's about 2 miles per hour slower than Usain Bolt ran when he ran the world record. So that's quite fast. And that was in a slippery, muddy place, barefoot. they calculated if this person would have worn shoes and run on a rubberized floor, he could have easily ran 28 miles per hour. And who knows if he was running at his maximum capability or not. Now let's go to Europe, 25,000 AD. Cro-Magnon people, you might have heard of them. Why are they interesting? They're interesting because they're really the first Europeans, the first European Homo sapiens sapiens. We were able to examine their bones. And what's interesting about the bones, when the ligament attaches to the bone, it creates a bony protrusion. And more force goes through your body, a joint, the protrusion gets larger. So we were able to calculate on every single joint what kind of forces went through those bodies. And what we found was extraordinary. That every single one of those Cro-Magnon people, based on how much force went through their bodies, they could have theoretically beat every single Olympic athlete who won at the Olympics. So the forces that went through their bodies were extraordinary. These people's capabilities was just something that is kind of difficult to comprehend today. All right, so let's come a little bit even closer. Now we are, let's say, the 1000 before, we started to count Christ years, right? Greek times. There was a gentleman whose name was, I always have a hard time with this, Eumstas. Eumstas lifted up a 1,058-pound boulder. What's interesting about this is that this boulder, till present day, you can find it in a museum. There is, they carved on it what actually took place. And this guy supposedly lifted up this stone up to his hip level. Now, 1,058 pounds is a very heavy weight. Currently, the world's record in deadlifting is 1,102 pounds, but that is performed with a bar that you can actually hang on and lift up. So that's quite significant. There was another guy, also during Greek times, who, his name was, I'm gonna tell you guys, Bybon. Kind of cool names. So Bybon lifted up a 315-pound boulder above his head with one arm. Now, that piece of boulder is still available as well in a museum with a carving on it. Bybon lifted this up above his head. You don't necessarily need to believe that, but when it comes to stuff like this, you might play with the idea. So, by the way, ever since the Greek times, many people tried to lift this particular weight up, and no one ever been able to do it. There was one guy who lifted it up to his shoulder level back in the 1800s, but that's it. 315 pounds with one arm over your head. It's quite fantastic. All right, so let's come a little bit closer. What was going on in Africa while all this was taking place? There's a very interesting pygmy hunting technique. Pygmies are relatively small, structured Africans, Homo sapiens. Now, they developed this hunting technique where they snuck up on elephants, they run underneath the elephant, they stab them from underneath, they ran away and hid away from the elephant afterwards. Now, I don't know if you guys ever been around elephants. I had the good fortune to be attacked by elephants several times in my life. And I know how that feels when an elephant is running at you, let alone the whole idea to go to this animal and try to kill it with, single-handedly. It's quite fascinating. Now, Maasai warriors. Maasai warriors, there was an initiation phase, there was a process of becoming a man. From a boy becoming a man. One of the things you had to do, you needed to kill a lion. But the way how you killed a lion was you were allowed to use a spear. You went up to the lion, you grabbed its tail, and then holding onto the tail and killing it with a spear is the process they used. Again, for all of us here in the modern world, that sounds like superhuman. Nothing else but superhuman. Tutsi initiation ceremonies were recorded back in the earlier part of the last century. These are recorded events. We have photographs of these events. Tutsi ceremonies basically, again, turning from boy to man, you had to perform a certain type of task. You needed to be able to jump over your own height. If you couldn't do that, you couldn't become a man. Now, these photographs and the people who witnessed this, they measured the heights these people were jumping over. And frequently, they jumped over 2 meters 52 centimeters. Just that you know, the current world record in high jump is 2 meters 45. So, and that height was regularly jumped over. We have pictures of this, we have measurements of these. These are the Tutsi initiation ceremonies. 1957, let's come even closer to today. 1957, Jean-Pierre Hollet, an anthropologist from Holland, was in Africa doing scientific research, and his camp was attacked by a leopard. Jean-Pierre Hellet ran at the leopard and single-handedly was able to hold off the leopard by using his fist and using his leg, boxing and kicking the leopard away. He couldn't kill the leopard until someone tossed a knife to him. Now, Jean-Pierre Hellet was a huge guy, 6'6", 257 pounds, but he only had one arm. So, needless to say, he was able to kill the leopard with one knife on his own. He didn't come away without scratches, but it's still quite unbelievable. Now, there are some monks in Japan who are currently still doing the following processes as part of their meditation process. That they are running monks. They're basically able to, they have a 7-year procedure. At the beginning of the 7th year, they start with an easy 19-mile run every day for 100 days in a row. 19 miles, that's 30 kilometers. Now they gradually work themselves up that the last year they run a double marathon every single day for 200 days in a row. Okay? 200 days in a row. Unbelievable, unbelievable. I had the good fortune to be involved with, through one of my clients, with some guys who managed to run 160 marathons in 111 days through the Sahara Desert. Okay? Again, some people who can really do some wild stuff. Now, let's just focus on the physicality, right? Because physicality is one thing. Let's look at the human brain. So, memorizing capability, something that, you know, it's very specific for human beings. You can really memorize a lot of different kinds of stuff. So, let's look at the modern memorization. Rappers are actually, interestingly enough, are the folks who are forced to memorize a lot of lyrics. Rap doesn't really work unless it's specific and it's very precise. So 50 Cent is one of the rappers who wrote many songs. He actually wrote about 100 songs. Each of his rap songs contain about 60 lines of lyrics. That comes out to be about 6,000 lines, which is quite a bit to memorize, right? Now, but let's go back a little bit further. So linguists were able to record the voices and the songs of oral traditions from the Slavic Goslar tradition. There was a gentleman whose name was Melodovich, who in the early 1900s, they recorded his songs. Now they recorded 350,000 plus lines of his songs that he was able to keep repeating. And they recorded him doing this. He was also able to sing back a song sang by another Goslar, who he didn't know previously, and he was able to sing back that song after listening to it once. The song contained 2,274 lines. He was able to sing that back after one hearing. Now, interestingly enough, he was illiterate. Now, but if you just go back a little bit further, think about this. We all study, you know, Homer, Iliad, Odyssey, right? We all know about this. Everyone learns it. Never really think about anyone that, okay, so back then people didn't write down the things, the poems, the stories, right? So just for the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer had to memorize 27,000 plus lines. So it's extraordinary what we can memorize with our brains. Why is this relevant to us? Why am I telling you this? It's because 1% of 1% of the human genome to change takes 100,000 years. That means the genes that you possess inside of yourself today has the same capabilities. What you have here, right now in your body, has the same capabilities. Well, you can say that, yeah, well, I could never lift up 1,058-pound boulder. Yeah, that doesn't matter. But you could do the half of it. Genetically, we're not that different. They examined the two most different human beings today who exist. And what they realized that the genetic difference between the most different human beings today is not nearly as much as just within one chimpanzee group, the genetic diversity. So we are so much the same, guys. There's no real difference genetically between you or an aboriginal or whoever. So whatever is inside of you, it's unbelievable. So there are some major capabilities. Now, I don't like theories. I never did. I've been having the good fortune to coach for 30 years pretty soon, folks on all different levels. And I never was about theoretical ideas. I was always about, okay, so if something is a possibility, let's see what I can do with it myself. I didn't want to just preach, I wanted to practice. So these ideas, what allowed me to do is break away from limitations that I had, because I was aware of these things. So this is how I managed to be able to work myself up to be able to squat with 405 pounds 90 times with only 2 minutes break in between the 3 sets. I was able to run, and I'm still doing that, running marathons barefoot every week for months at a time. So I was able to win BMX competitions, discus throwing competitions, all that kind of stuff. I was able to learn plays, just literally reading one play at the time once, and I was able to learn my lines and perform them off Broadway and so on. So the reason I'm saying this is not bragging. I'm saying this because this is not theory. This is possible to do. I experienced it first time. Through my clients, I also do the same thing. I always set out the highest expectations towards my clients, because what can happen is magical. Not so long ago, a young businessman who was 26 walked into my office and he told me that he needs to get into shape. Now, he was 330 pounds. This gentleman was 5'8", quite large man. He wasn't very kind, he wasn't very cozy, but his mentor told him that, hey, listen, no one ever became super successful without being in some sort of decent shape. That was his motivation. He tried everything previously during his young adult life to lose the weight, but he wasn't really motivated, never really got rolling with it. But that somehow his mentor was able to hit a nerve in him. So what he did, he came down and he said, yeah, I need to get into better shape. Now, throughout my past 30 years, and analyzing, assessing thousands of people, all shapes and sizes, there was something that I realized what's going on in our modern world. We all focusing and specializing. We are specializing. Heart surgeons specialize on a particular thing. We learn more and more and more about less and less and less aspect of life itself. So much so that most people feel insecure about their own interests. They have a career, they have one thing they do, and they are almost scared to tell about any of their other interests to anyone else. And that's exactly what happens to most folks. Everyone is scared to express their interest towards many different directions. But that's very abnormal for us as human beings. Right up until recent times, the idea of the Renaissance men is what was appreciated amongst everyone. Leonardo da Vinci, who was an extraordinary inventor, scientist, painter, sculptor, an amazing specimen who was able to bend metal rods with his bare arms, which that was the only thing that supposedly he was bragging about all the time. Not about his paintings, sculpting, inventions, about that he could bend metal rods. You know, if you think about someone like Einstein, for example, we all know he was an amazing physicist, but many people are not aware that his understandings and research in economics also affected the way how we live today. He was an extraordinary violinist as well. He was holding concerts once in a while. He was that good at violin. Now think about today. If you would want to hire someone for a particular job, you know, would you feel comfortable to go to a place where you want to be a physicist and you tell, yeah, I want to be this physicist. Yeah, I'm also giving violin concerts. What would happen? No one would hire you. They're like, oh yeah, this guy is not able to focus, right? So this is the reason why people like, you know, the movie came out just recently, Bohemian Rhapsody. The lead guitar player, Brian May, who was an extraordinary physicist as a young man. They actually, they wanted to recruit him to some of the cutting edge places, universities, to become a major physicist. And he felt like he needed to turn that down because he loved music so much, and he became super successful in music. But maybe he could have done it all. He could have done it all. Now, what happened to the young man? After a couple of years, the young man was able to lose 175 pounds. He was able to change the way how he thinks. He became a Tai Chi master. He met a love of his life and became his wife. Had 2 kids, and on the sideline, even though he was already making at age 26 so much money that most of us could never even dream of, he made 10 times the amount of money he made. And what did he do? He, instead of just focusing on work, he split his attention, and he allowed himself to start to behave like a human being wired to behave. So that's what happened to him. Now, all this sounds maybe crazy, but in the last 30 years, this is what I realized. When you want to take better care of yourself, you need to open up your mind. And you need to be able to go about your life physically in many different ways. Practicing one sport going to the gym regularly, that's not well-being. You cannot do that till the day you die. I am interested always about processes that work from this day on until, you know, you die, until age of 100, 110, whatever you end up deciding to live, you know. So these processes all can work. If you put all of these skills, survival skills, into practice, and you work on your mind differently, and you go towards your desires, now that's the whole package itself contributes a very vital, very capable human being. Single ideologies, single processes don't ever work. So this is what Bob and I were so excited about, joining forces, and we've both been at this for a long time, for 30 years or so, both of us. And it was very exciting for us that he came from one angle, I came from another angle, and then we realized we had a lot of overlap. So this is what we started to intertwine our processes. And this processes, what we are trying to do is not only going to create your strongest years coming your way, but at the same token, when people work on themselves this way, what we do, we are changing the world from the inside out. Because when you're like that, when you're this very holistic, complete human being who accesses a big percentage of your genetic DNA, that's when we can create something that's exciting for us. So, Bob, thank you very much. This is basically what I wanted to kind of throw out there for you. It's a lot of information, but it kind of maybe gives you an idea of what exactly I'm doing and why I'm so stuck up on these primordial rituals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Csaba. That's very interesting stuff. Our overlap came when we began talking about some of the achievements that our elite athletes accomplish. And, someone once said to me recently, when I tried to compare their training to an elite athlete, they said, well, they're an elite athlete. They weren't always an elite athlete. They started with a set of genes that made them more successful at certain skills, but they certainly had to develop a lot more than they were born with. And so it brings up the whole nature-nurture issue about genetics. And there's been really exciting, really exciting research done in the last few decades about nature-nurture and how it affects our genetics. We once thought that the genes you were born with, you were stuck with, that wrote the script for your life. And that, if your mom and dad had high cholesterol, you were gonna have high cholesterol. If they were overweight or diabetic, you were going to be the same. We now know that's not true at all. That really the sets of genes that your parents give you are guidelines, but you are very much in control on how those genes are going to be expressed. This whole area of study is called epigenetics. And science has shown that your genes don't always replicate the same way. Well, we can relate to that because we know about aging, and there's a reason why the body ages. We're going to talk about it. But that process alone suggests that the genes in each cell don't always replicate the same way. In fact, the genetics, the material of the genes, the DNA can denigrate over time from various reasons. So what's exciting about that is that we talked about this here at Phase 4 for the last probably decade, that we train people for their genetics. Meaning they come to us in all sizes and shapes and forms, and they might have similar problems. Two people might have excessive cholesterol or high blood pressure, or they might have extra pounds. But how they got there is very different, and how they're going to get out of it needs to be, how they're going to improve, needs to be personal to their genetics. Meaning that we see the result of your current lifestyle when you come into us, and we assess your fitness level and other physiological parameters, and we have to now figure out how to tweak things to make it different, to make things change. So epigenetics tells us that certain genes not all genes are expressed all the time. In other words, there's genes in your body that are only expressed if you're overweight. There's genes in your body that are only expressed if you're under constant stress. And so really the genes give us a great ability to adapt to our environment, but they also are affected by our environment. How you treat your body therefore your genetics, and your genes in each cell is going to make a difference on how they replicate each time. So you can see with the studies, say for identical twins. Identical twins have been studied, they have pretty much the same genome. We realize now that it's not exactly the same, because even in the replication cycle, when they were in utero, even that replication of those two sets of genes, there was changes, variances. And so they don't have the exact same genetics, but we see pretty close set for identical twins. It's best to study them than, say, even two brothers or sisters. But if you studied two twins, and the longer they spent in their lifetime apart, the more different their health and fitness profile is going to be. So there's been twins, separated at birth. Now there's a great TV show, triplets that were separated, I believe, purposely at birth, and very much different expression of those genes. They had the same genes, but a very different expression because they lived different lifestyles. Let's see. And so when we studied that, we realized, well, what happened with that? So what are the things that can affect the way your genes are expressed? Certainly your lifestyle, the amount of exercise and activity you have, the nutrition you follow, your environment, even really your physical, your psychological makeup, the big things you experience can affect. If you have a trauma in your life, it can make a difference on how your genes are going to express their various traits. What we've learned, and maybe we'll get that upside down. What we've learned to do here is to do assessments, listen to the way you've trained. It's very important for us not only to get your current activity level and your current nutrition, but a history of how. And so I'll ask people going back to middle school. What were your sports in middle school, high school, college, or your activities? What was your life like? Where did you live, more or less? How did you end up here after college, the 30s, 40s, 50s, however old our clients are? We're going to get a history of what they've been doing, because that tells me a lot about what I'm seeing in front of me. In the physical therapy realm, we see that story told in the joints as well. So I can examine the patient, they stand in front of me. I can see where one thing that Csaba referenced was that the human body is very much also adaptable, and then the stress placed on it creates different body features. So we can tell someone standing in front of me, I can tell if they've been running for 20 years or for 5 years, the changes that occur in the long distance runner for a long time are obvious. And I train our young therapists to read what's in front of them. It's a similar thing here. We're going to see what your current fitness level is like, what your activities have been, and then start to make changes that will make a difference. The essence of how we do that is based on some interesting research that was done going back to the early 1900s from a gentleman named Hans Sells, and he wrote a book about the general adaptation principles or processes of the human body. And he wrote about how if you take, and it's, even though, and you've probably heard this before, it was variation of genetics, but they're also much more alike than they are different. And he's talking about the organism in general. You put certain stress on it, there's going to be a characteristic response to that stress. And what the athletic community did was take that, borrow that concept, and say, okay, if we know a stress is going to create a change, what type of stress do we want to create? What kind of change do we want to make? And that is based on the goal of, say, for an athlete. So in the Eastern Bloc countries during the Cold War, they had the ability to do a lot of research that we couldn't do in the West. First of all, they started out with an ethnically homogenous group, whether they were Bulgarian or German or Russian. And then they centralized their athletes at a very young age to a part of the country where they can control variables. Then they train those athletes in such a way, but they're controlling for diet, for sleep, for climate, and then controlling a lot of the training variables, and then subtly varying a few of the training variables, say for runners, distance and intensity, and then seeing the results. They did a lot of invasive studies that we can't do in America, meaning muscle biopsies, blood samples after workouts, and although all that information is ethically corrupt, it was scientifically rational. We saw, and the Eastern European showed us that if you train athletes in a certain way, you're going to get a very specific response out of them. The response is also, it reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book about the outliers. And he's talking about, well, it takes 10,000 hours to perfect a certain skill. Well, the truth is, it depends on where you started with the genetic gifts for that skill. That's where you're going to end up. Not all of us can do 10,000 hours and dance as a premier dancer or play the violin as the best in the world. We're all the same with athletics. We're going to improve all about the same amount, but our starting point genetically is different. You might have more gifts that make you a better runner, thrower, and so while you can train 24 throwers the same way, doesn't mean they're all going to have the same abilities at the end of that training scale, because they all started with a different genetic potential. Our point here is to train people up to their genetic potential. And there are some people in this room, I won't point them out, who are training up to their genetic potential. They are clients of ours that do everything we ask them to do. And I tell my staff, these folks are worth your whole career because it's proving your science. Not all of us can do everything what we set out to do, but certain people are motivated to do that, and then you get to see the results. Elite athletes help us in the same way. Elite athletes don't have to worry about, most of the time, a job. Don't have to worry about a whole lot of stress. All you got to worry about is train, recover, and repeat. And so when you give them a set of circumstances to follow, you're going to see very standardized results. And that's what periodization, is the name of the training that the Eastern Europeans developed, is so vital. Because it is really a cookbook that if everyone followed it, everyone would get fitter. Of course, there's personal variation along the way, but it's the same basic principles because it's based on how we stress the human body. So in exercise, the body undergoes stress. That stress, it causes a response in the human body. We want to manipulate that response. Stress plus recovery equals adaptation. So if we all started gymnastics, we would be sore and hurting for the first few weeks, then we get stronger, and after about 8 weeks at a single skill, we might actually peak for our current level of fitness, and then it's time to reevaluate and attack that skill again. So periodization tells us how to treat athletes, and it's based, this response to stress is based on your hormones. And in the Eastern European countries, it was the endocrinologists who were best able to predict results. They're the ones who studied the hormone levels of various athletes and how it responded to a specific training plan. And at the end of the day, they were the ones who said, look, Coach so-and-so has his athletes, whatever routine he's following, we did their blood test and their hormones are all peaked at this period, right when we're going to compete, and they're going to win. The Eastern Europeans only cared about, they didn't care about a 128 season game in some of our pro leagues. They cared about showing up at the Olympics and winning a gold medal, showing up at the World Championships, winning a gold medal, or setting a world record. They cared about peaking the best you can be on that day. And so if you work backwards, and if you look at sports that use very specific objective measurements, meaning putting a shot, how far it goes, or throwing a javelin, or jumping over a bar, or lifting weights and weightlifting, you're going to see those sports are very regimented training using periodization, how they're going to develop the fitness necessary to get that job done and peak on that day. When you have a game like team sport more, where there's a whole lot of emotion going on, there's teamwork, there's different variations in everyone's personality, you don't see them training into that degree of specificity because the other sports require that. We're going to go to the World Championship. The day, for instance, we were in Rio and our athlete Allison Felix won her 7th, 8th, and 9th gold medal of her career. And the minute she stepped off the track in 400 meters, the coach I worked with, Bobby Kersey, we know exactly what it's going to take in 4 years from that day in Tokyo for her to win the gold medal, within a 100th of a second. We know we studied the progression of the improvements in the 200, 400 meter sprints, and we know what he has to do to get her improved, so 4 years she's back on that gold medal stand. And he's done that with athletes 9 Olympics in a row. He's put someone on the gold medal podium in track and field 9 Olympics in a row. Total of 60 Olympic medalists. And, we can, look, we never take credit for an athlete's, God-given and parental-given genetic talent, but we'll take a lot of credit for how we shepherded them along. And when Allison Felix won her 9th gold medal in Rio, she surpassed the previous GOAT, GOAT, the greatest of all time, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, who was our athlete as well. So she wrested that title from Jackie, and what we're proud of is Jackie went to 4 Olympics, and Allison's now shooting for her 5th Olympics. That doesn't happen by chance, that doesn't happen by pure genetic talent, that happens by how she's trained. Her coach is a genius. We've done our part trying to keep her healthy. Going back to Jackie Jordan Kersey in 1980, and through her career ended in 96, we covered everything, their strengthening, their stretching, their injury prevention, nutrition, and we've seen the science build in those areas to be able to support these athletes better. So our approach, we only talk about elite athletes because they are our flagship. They are our showboat. We can see changes. When we make a small change, we see an immediate result on the track. With the rest of us mere mortals, it might take 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to add a certain technique of stretching or strengthening or conditioning. It takes a while to see the results. With elite athletes, you see it right away, and they prove to be, well, they're your proving grounds. They prove to be your test pilot and your subjects. And so we enjoy that, but most of the people who come to Phase 4 are not elite athletes. I would say 2% are elite athletes. The rest of them are folks just like us trying to reach our highest genetic potential. And so with science now, we know there are ways to get this job done a lot easier. And one of them, well, we know now for the general public, I hope everyone in the room knows that exercise is essential. And I really look at all research that has been done in the past is useless because it was done on a sick population, meaning a population that wasn't active. As you just heard from Csaba, we were made to move. We were made to run, climb, walk, solve physical problems. We are physical, active beings. So when they do research in 1960 on whether cholesterol is this or blood pressure is that or bone density is this, it's all garbage to me because it was not garbage. It's a study of sick people that are missing one giant link in their life. So I hope everyone realizes you have to exercise. Why do you have to exercise? And what kind of exercise is best? It's clear to me, and the research shows, that aerobic, persistent exercise, persistence training is something that Csaba talked about. So endurance training, this is things that you can do for, say, over 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. It's relatively low intensity compared to sprinting or lifting the heaviest weight you can lift. That kind of continuous movement creates physiological changes that really protect us against the lifestyle diseases that we see everyone suffering. So now I think there's 8 different types of cancer that aerobic or endurance exercise is shown to diminish the risks from 8 different types of cancer. There's, of course, cardiovascular disease. Not only now do we see that we can halt, atherosclerosis and other hardening of the arteries and calcification of arteries, but you can also reverse it to some degree with aerobic exercise. Of course, mental decline. We're really the biggest thing now in medicine is, in elderly medicine, is to mix exercise movement with cognitive challenge. So much more effective. And it's not just effective for old people. They prove this with kids. There's a school in Chicago that one of the poorest performing schools in their district. They cut out first period. They put everyone on the track, gave them a heart rate monitor, so the entire school was walking, running, or crawling, whatever you could do, around that track for first period. This stimulates something called an endotropic brain growth hormone, brain growth factor. And only when you're in movement, you have to remember, and it ties into what Csaba has been talking about, our brains are made to find food. And when organisms like coral have a brain while they're floating in the ocean, but because they have to find food, once they attach to the coral, they absorb their brain, they don't need it anymore. So you have to realize that primary function is to find food, right? And then shelter and other things. In that process of learning, movement creates the chemicals that allow synapses to form. So now you'll see right here in Santa Monica some of the leading research, and we were involved with some of that, is people on a treadmill walking while they're doing cognitive skills. And research clearly shows that it's so much more potent than just studying and just doing the cognitive skills therapy. So aerobic exercises reduces the decline of the mental capacity, cognitive function. We know, of course, exercise helps mood stability and emotional well-being. So people say to me, they also, how many people have heard of HIIT training, high-intensity training? And I have dialogue with my colleagues, even though I come from a lot of strength and power sports, personally, and we train a lot of MMA fighters and wrestlers, and of course, there's sprinters or anaerobic athletes. The truth is that it's an aerobic function that builds all the protections against disease and produces the baseline of all fitness. So what we've proven is that and Bobby Kersey, the track coach I was talking about, he's helped me prove this. When he first started with him, I was right out of school. I thought I knew everything. And I showed up on the track, and he was training Flojo, Florence Griffith Joyner, one of the fastest sprinters of all time, still has a world record. And she went out in a 5-mile run. I said, Coach, her race is 11 seconds. Why is she out in a 5-mile run? And he didn't have the science then, but he knew from experience that if his athletes didn't have the endurance to go that long, they can't make it through a practice of repeated events and skills and drills. They need endurance. It has to be the bedrock. Too many athletes think I'm an explosive sport athlete, it should be all anaerobic. So they're mistaken. MMA fighters who go as hard as they can for 3 minutes, whether it's 5 rounds or 3 rounds, they make the mistake of thinking, all my training has to be anaerobic, that's what it takes. Wrestlers, Olympic wrestlers who go a 6-minute match at high intensity, they think that that's not, first of all, you can't do high intensity training continually without burning out. So my point high intensity training has its place, but the bedrock of all health and fitness is to have a huge aerobic base, a metabolic foundation. What does that mean? Aerobic foundation means that you're able, and the things that Csaba was talking about, that to burn fat as a primary energy source. And that is the goal of all our metabolic programs. Regardless of your sport or your well-being, I know we have to develop this foundation of aerobic metabolic fitness, which is the ability to burn more fat for energy. So just so you know, if we all got up in a treadmill and we started walking, we'd be burning fat, we'd burn a little bit of carbohydrate, mostly fat. As we made the treadmill faster and faster, all of a sudden we'd see your body shift from fat burning to carbohydrate burning. In competition and in competitive sports, that's a problem because you only have so much carbohydrate in your body. How many people have run a marathon? How many people have seen everyone crash at mile 18?
How many crashed at mile 18?
The only reason the marathon has been such a fabled distance and a historic race going back 4,000 years when Philippides ran from Marathon to Athens to give news of a war is because right about, it's just past the ability of the average human to carry enough carbohydrate in their body to get the job done. If you can run 17 miles, you can run 50 miles, if your body can hold up. Because if you run at the right pace, you're burning fat and not carbs. So while carbs are limited, they will run out, and they usually run out if you're not trained properly at mile 18. The truth is, if you go into your fat burning zone, you have 80,000 calories of fat stored, even the skinniest person here, so you can run 2 marathons back to back. You have enough fuel in the tank if your feet and your Achilles and everything else held up, you can keep going. Those are things that are going on. That's the kind of fitness our ancestors must have had to do an 8-hour hunt down an animal. And so we see now going back to our basic functions. We have to have endurance. Sure, we need speed, so we need strength, we need power. Those all have their place in a training plan, but I can tell you that's not a constant, cannot be a constant diet of that. In fact, when we try to peak an athlete for the World Championships or the Olympics, we have to save that hard work for about 11 weeks before the competition. If you did high intensity earlier, we see the studies. If we all started high intensity training now, our hormones would go up, testosterone, growth hormone, insulin, they would all start to peak. And then after about 8 weeks, they'd all start to fade. And you start doing the same workout. That's why you go to the gym in January and you got your New Year's resolution and you work up to 8 plates on the machine. And that's great for January and February and part of March. By April, it's harder than it used to be. You have a sore shoulder and you're putting on more weight that you lost. That's because you broke the 8-week rule of hormone adaptation. If we stress your body, the hormones are going to increase for about 8 weeks. Then we're going to give you, for athletics, we give some recovery, and then we peak an athlete, maybe 10 or 11 weeks since we started the high intensity, but we're not going to keep it up all the time. So when I see my colleagues and I see folks going to, CrossFit, other high intensity training, and they're like, it was the greatest shape of my life, and then what happened? You got sick after about 2 months, or you got injured and you stopped, and then you got, what you consider fat lazy, and then you got back into it and you got in the best shape of your life about 8 weeks, and then you were sidetracked again. Instead, we want your fitness to be like this. That's periodization. It's constantly going up, but it's going up in peaks and valleys. We're creating stress, body releases hormones to make you stronger, take away the stress, your fitness peaks. Then after your recovery, bring up more work, stress the body again and get it done. So it's a hormonal response to the stress of exercise that makes her stronger. And the Europeans, of course, realized that and just started giving their athletes hormones, and the rest of the world followed, so I'm not throwing stones. And that's how doping came about. Periodization is natural doping. For the rest of us, It's natural. It's a natural way to keep your physiology peaked. So we need exercise to prevent all those diseases. We need aerobic fitness first, then we need some intensity. We also need exercise for other reasons. How many people have heard of sarcopenia? You will be hearing about it. Sarcopenia is a loss of muscle mass as we age. Our muscle mass peaks at about age 25, and then it's all downhill. I know that's depressing. But if you train with resistance training, that doesn't have to be the case. You can keep your muscle mass well into your 80s and 90s if you use resistance training. We recently had a great subject, was 89 years old, and he did great things here. You can read about him in the LA Times article here. Mr. Wallach improved his VO2 by 14%, lost weight, improved his agility and strength at 89 years old. So the other reason we need to lift weights to keep our muscle mass, because you're going to need your muscle mass when you get older. Muscles burn more calories than the rest of your body, and so when you lose muscle mass, you start putting on weight. You can see this weight gain that comes with age. Secondly, who's heard of osteopenia? Osteoporosis. How many know that that's not just a woman's problem? While 2 out of 4 women are going to have an osteoporotic fracture in their lifetime, 1 out of 4 men are as well, and we're all living longer. If you don't have strong muscles pulling on your bone, the other misnomer about osteoporosis, everyone thinks you have to be weight-bearing, loading the bones, what we call axial loading of the bone, to get it to suck in more or keep the calcium. It's not true. When muscles pull on bones and actually bend them, so if you're running down San Vicente Boulevard and your quads and hamstrings and glutes are firing hard, they're actually bending your bones. That bending of the bone is what makes the bone even more thirsty to drink in calcium. So osteoporosis, sarcopenia, cancer, heart disease, mental decline, the answer is exercise. We can help you get there. We do it in a fashion that's not about, you don't come in here and sweat through your clothes, and we don't cut down your diet to 2 carrots and a celery stick. In fact, our work with weight loss is a total opposite. We believe, and we see all the time, people come in trying to lose weight, and they're working out harder and harder, and they're eating less and less, and they're not getting fit, and they're not losing weight. And the answer is very simple with science. You can't starve your metabolism. Weight loss really comes from how you generate a higher metabolic rate, how it's burning calories all day long, not during your workout. The calories you burn during your workout are really, it's not important, because you're going to go home and eat and replace that anyway. What's important is, how did you take that 40 minutes or 50 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes of your life? How did you train your body in that time to change it so it works differently 24/7? And that comes from using the right heart rate to work in the right zones to create the right physiological adaptations. And then we see results. And in that period, we're feeding your metabolism. So we work with wrestlers and MMA fighters and jockeys who need to make weight. And they come in starving. It's all total wrong approach. As soon as you go into starve mode, your body shuts down its metabolism, burns very little calories, holds on to every ounce of fat. It's a survival mechanism for times of, between feast and famine. Your body's going to learn to hold on to everything for survival. What you have to do is feed your body, feed your metabolism so it's burning higher, train in the right heart rate zone so you create a higher metabolic rate. And if you do it, the majority of your work is in the fat burning zone, you're going to naturally lean out. So my fighters and MMA athletes lose weight, they get down so much easier. They've accused that we have the easiest weight cuts. Athletes who go through horrendous weight cuts to try to get down to weight, sometimes losing 12 and 15 pounds in 48 hours. Not our athletes. We have feeding them, training them, hydrating them right up to the day of the weigh-in. They eat. I make them eat breakfast the day of the weigh-in. We would go in the sauna or do a workout to lose maybe 2 or 3 pounds of water. That's it. They make weight, fully fed, fully hydrated. They've been accusing us of giving them some kind of drug that they're not going to pass their drug test. Like, the drug's called science. It's very simple. There are so many bad, things, conventional wisdom ideas out there in these sports on how to make weight and how to train. And when we use science, it gets a lot easier. So here at Phase 4, I want to introduce quickly, come on up, Shelby. Shelby Stoner is a master's level exercise physiologist. Come on up, Csaba, we'll take some questions. And I just want you to hear, she's going to be available for your questions. I also want you to realize that we have a special, you'll see it on our handout. I apologize if the PowerPoint didn't come around. But on there, you'll see we have a special, for introductory specials for Phase 4 and also for Csaba's company. And you can see some of the skills, some of the specials there, and some of the services we do. The testing that we do, a lot of people are intimidated by it. So I wanted you to meet Shelby and you can ask questions, but the testing is not intimidating. You don't have to train for the test. The purpose of the testing, which is a VO2 test or a resting metabolic rate test, is to find out where you're at now to give us a roadmap how to get to where we want to go. So the treadmill test of the VO2 is as simple as putting on a mask. Shelby's going to ask you to start walking. We're measuring in a fancy $10,000 machine that's around here somewhere, measures how much oxygen you're taking in. And the VO2 test is kind of like if you had a car and you couldn't open the hood to see how many cylinders it has, but you had a gauge to see how much gas was going into the carburetors, you can make an inference from the gas going into the engine how big the engine is. So that's what oxygen is telling us. If you have a bigger aerobic engine, you're going to be taking in more oxygen, and we can measure that. Now we go harder and harder, and then we see all of a sudden there's more carbon dioxide, and we see, oh, now you're burning more carbs. So it's a simple test. You wear a mask. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's not like you have to, perform it. It's a short test, and we find out a lot of information. That's a starting point. The resting metabolic rate test is as simple as laying down with the same mask on, and that'll tell us again by how much oxygen you're using, how aerobically or how fit you are in general, or specifically, what is your metabolic rate, how many calories you're burning per hour. So there's some specials there. We've offered the metabolic special. So how do you know? The structural exam on the top is if you have more injuries and physical problems, and that's what your major barrier is to you reaching your goals, you might start with that. As a physical therapist, I've seen almost every injury imaginable. We'll evaluate your body from head to toe, design a personalized strength and flexibility program you can do at home, or you can do at the gym, or a combination of both. The second special is the metabolic special, the VO2 test and the RMR. So if you find that I can exercise fine, I can walk fine. If you can walk, or you can bicycle slowly, or you can do any aerobic movement, and you want to find out the heart rates that will be most productive to developing the fitness and the physiology you need to meet your goals, then you do that package. If you want to do both of them, they're both discounted as well. Csaba, tell us a little bit about your introductory package.
Okay, so the way how we assess our clients at the very beginning is quite complex. Usually it takes me about 2 months or so to finish my assessment phase. So obviously it's very difficult for someone to commit and say, okay, so let's do that 2 months together and let's see what you say after 2 months. That's not realistic, even though I still have to do that. It doesn't matter who you are. So I have an initial assessment program that basically assesses your lifestyle and what exactly you do when you're not exercising, when you're not performing. The performance aspect of it and how your body works when you're moving with the VO2 max test and stuff like that, these guys are extraordinary at it. And I'm really focusing a lot on, with this initial assessment, on the lifestyle. Why is that important? When I ask people, for example, how do you sleep, right? And what position do you sleep? They're like, well, I'm a soccer player. I'm trying to be the world's best soccer player. Why do you care how I sleep? I sleep really well. And I'm like, well, it's because you have an issue with your ankle, and that might have some relevance to it. For example, just give you a quick rundown here. If you lay on your tummy, in America, if you were born before 1978, there's a good chance that they put you on your tummy and they told your parents to put the baby on their tummy before 1978. So that means that there's a good chance that you spend a fair bit of time sleeping on your tummy. Now, if that's the case, what happens is when your head is on the pillow, it pushes against your jaw. When the jaw, there's a force pushes against the jaw, the only way your jaw, the mandible, doesn't get dislocated if you clench your teeth. When you clench your teeth, these muscles get contracted, and they work together with the suboccipital muscles, the base of your skull, right? So when these muscles get tightened, they get shorter. When these muscles tighten at the same time, they also get shorter. They lift your skull up ever slight bit. Now what happens when your skull is a little bit lifted up? What happens is one of the strongest reflex mechanisms in the human brain is to keep your eyes horizontal level. So suddenly your body is going to tilt you forward a little bit so you can have your eyes horizontal level. What happens? You fall on your face. So your body is going to start to make adjustments. It's going to tilt your pelvis forward, so it pulls the upper body back, for example. There's many different ways your body can compensate. And then when that happens, so you don't fall on your face, suddenly your pelvis is turned forward. You have a little bit of extra arch in your lower back, as you can see here. Your pelvis is turning forward. Now, when your pelvic turn forward, your thighs roll inward. When your thighs roll inward, you lock your knees a little bit. So your ankle is going to have to work harder and more because now you have a locked knee, a little bit more locked than normal. So your ankles have to work way more. So you're twisting your ankles. You can keep rehabbing your ankles as much as you can. If you're still sleeping on your stomach and you're not adjusting everything all the way up, you're screwed. So that's why lifestyle matters. The way you sleep matters. The way how you eat matters. The gentleman I was referring to earlier, the one who lost 175 pounds, he said the single most important thing, what we did with him that changed his life was when he was eating, he was actually focusing on what he was eating and he was enjoying it. He said that's what made out of the 175, at least 100 pounds was because of that. And that wouldn't have happened if we don't focus on the lifestyle itself as well. So our initial package of assessment contains a lifestyle analysis. So from that, I can already have a good idea what is going to be your biggest bang for your buck when it comes to focusing in your life that will help a better quality life, develop a better quality life for yourself.
Well, Shaba's going to take questions.
So I thought so you were supposed to say something about the assessment you did.
Yeah, I think it'll come out in the questions. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Recovery. Are there any new surveys or studies where certain supplements, whether it's BCAAs or collagen or mangoes, is there any new studies on good things for recovery?
We know.
Recovery.
Yeah, we're big on recovery, and we do a lot of recovery is just built. The recovery is built into every training plan. And I find, including with our elite athletes, I recently had a fighter who came to me, and he was working with one of the best math teachers in the world, who built an algorithm to show his recovery. And he did a few tests every morning, and he gave the numbers to his mathematician, who then would say if he recovered or not. I said to him, I want you to please do that, but don't call me unless the athlete gets overtrained, unless you get not recovering. And so for a 12-week training camp, I never heard from him. And when I did hear from him, he's like, well, he was more recovered in this camp at every point than any other previous camp. And my point is just plug in the recovery. So that analogy of that is that we've learned over the years not to go with a lot of supplementation. The field is notoriously dishonorable, so that you can go, there's recent bust has shown that, you go to GNC and half the products didn't contain what the bottle said, they contained other products the bottle said it didn't have. And so with all that in mind, our elite athletes who are trained the hardest, we can't take any supplements because we can't risk a bad blood test, right, a drug test. So you come in here, you're going to see us telling people to eat close to the earth, eat good unprocessed food, feed the metabolism, of course lots of veggies and healthy foods, and then we find that the recovery does well. Now, like I said, they don't have to work. They may or may not have a relationship to worry about, but the rest of us have a job, a relationship, and a life, and a mortgage maybe, and 2 kids and what have you, and so we're trying to achieve a marathon fitness status. How can we help ourselves? Well, because we just don't see a lot of great research from this, and they change. What was in favor 3 years ago with all my colleagues swore if you weren't doing A, B, or C, you were take away your license. That's just proven. So we just know. The short answer to your question is, I think a healthy diet, eating close to the earth, meaning if the food looks like it was when it came out of the earth or off the animal, then you're doing pretty good. If the bigger key is what people are missing is you're not taking enough calories, you're not drinking enough. And so we do those measurements. And that's one of the things that Shelby looks for is when we do an RMR, we know how many calories you need every day to sustain your body as it is. But what so many athletes do is they have the same meal most of the time, and then but one day they're training for 2 hours, and the other day they're training for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. You have to adjust the calories. So we see people who are trying to lose weight, eat too little, and then they do big workouts, they go below their basal metabolic rate, and that puts their body back into concentration camp mode, save every ounce of fat and every ounce of water. And so they constantly dip below the calories they need. So using the science is simple. We don't believe really in counting calories, but you have to be in the right zone. You can't be grossly out of your calorie requirement need. So I think recovery comes more from training right with built-in recovery. So periodization has built-in hard days or work days every week and recovery days every week. You have 3 work weeks in a month and a recovery week. It means you're doing about 75% of what you're doing before. You have recovery months every year. When you just plug this in, we just find people do great. And especially for most of us who aren't making a living and aren't doing this against the world's best, where 100th of a second matters, we don't need to have a razor sharp edge on that. We need to be in the ballpark, the right amount of calories, the right amount of work, the right amount of recovery, the right amount of sleep. I think, 7 8 hours of sleep at night, including naps and rest time, meditation. So we're more into those things for recovery than finding science. I don't think too many people have found things other than, illegal substances that are proven over and over again to be effective at recovery.
When it comes to recovery, seasonality for a human being is super important. Because whenever you lived out in nature, and still, let's face it, 99.9% of our evolutionary past, we lived with nature. Nature structured your periodization, because there were seasons. During different seasons, different animals came around. Different fruit, different vegetables were around. You had to dig some vegetables out. Some animals required for you to club them. Some animals required for you to run after them. And seasonally, your activities changed naturally. When you lived in nature, you needed to harvest nature the way how it was available to you. And that itself structured your physical, rest and recuperation as well. So these days, what a lot of athletes and average folks do as well. With athletes, I understand. They have a certain goal. This is what they accomplish. But with average folks, I've never understood why are they focusing on one particular activity and they do that all the time. Same with food. They know berries are good for them, right? So they eat berries every single day. They know oatmeal is good for them, so they eat oatmeal every single day. It's a completely abnormal thing. I grew up in Eastern Europe, in Hungary, and even while I was growing up during communism, there was no such things. Like we ate, strawberries for about 3-4 weeks out of the year because that's when it was available. Right? When you do that, you will never develop allergies for strawberries. You will be actually really hungry for them. Right? So same with animals. There are certain times of the year when you eat a certain type of animal. Even in the recent history, that was what taking place. So you just open your mind up a little bit. Do a little bit of research. Don't worry about the cutting edge science in this regard and see what makes sense to me. Does it make sense to me to eat every single day the same thing? Every week similar food? Or should I maybe just look at what would entail for example, in my case, a Caucasian, what kind of seasonality would be present in my life? And try to hit the ballpark with that. And see how much more fun to eat that way. And how much more fun it's to exercise that way. So, and then the rest, the recovery kind of takes care of itself. Because if you don't run all the time, January through December, but you're focusing on a certain type of run, certain time, and then you're focusing on another kind of activity a little bit more, and you keep switching your activities, besides that you're never going to get bored of it and burn out, out of a certain activity, you also recover, and you take care of yourself from many different angles.
Good stuff. Any other questions? Sure.
Do you have to use weights or can body weight exercises like rings and all that, and what do you call tubing? Can that work instead of weights? Or?
Yeah, you have to be really, with body weight you're going to get to a certain amount of strength, and there's some ways you can leverage that, but it's tricky, and it's a lot of wear and tear in your joints. So in reality, resistance training is a much faster way to build muscle, build bone density, than just body weight alone.
And bands?
Rubbers, it's the...
What is going on?
Yes, for instance, there is a new concept. We've developed a group of rubber loops. You'll see them here. We have them made in Taiwan, and we're importing them. The reason rubber resistance is a little bit more beneficial for gaining muscle size is that there's constant tension. The muscle's under constant tension. When it's under constant, because when you lift weights, you're hard, and then it's easy. It's really not that much tension when it's up here. When the band is holding at hard tension, there's no blood can get into the muscle. That's what builds size. So there's a whole big movement now in bodybuilding, but also in medicine. If you have an older person who's kind of frail, they can't do a lot of weight, they're using cuffs to cut off the blood supply to that muscle somewhat, diminish it, while you do some slow resistance with a light weight, and they're getting more hypertrophy, more size. So this blood deprivation, which I saw people doing this 10 years ago in the athletic world. I read about the research. A little scary to me, unless you have real training to do it. But more to your point, I do believe that especially for older joints, because you can adjust it a little bit. The rubber resistance gives you a little bit more freedom and get the right position where the weight's going to do one thing. It's going to pull down, in one direction. So I do believe, and you can get them over there, the quad loops and the duo loops. My athletes travel with them. They go right there, it fits in your hand. I do a complete workout, my whole body in 15 minutes on those things. My athletes travel with them, so when they can't get to a gym, they can do the work. So that was a good question. It doesn't have to be weights. We really believe in water therapy. You know, we wrote a book on water exercise. We have a pool at our physical therapy office. By the way, our physical therapy office is on 5th and Wilshire in Santa Monica. And anyone that comes to our lectures is available to have a free injury consultation anytime. If you just call and say, I was out at the lecture at phase 4, if you want your knee checked out, we'll do a free evaluation anytime. And we'll decide, you know, what to make the diagnosis, try to work together. If you can't work with us for any other reason, we'll find someone to work with. But we'll always do a free eval to get you on the right path. Analogous to that, here at phase 4, you can do a free consultation with myself or the other PTs or with Shelby. We have 2 master levels physical therapists. You met Chelsea on the way in. She's at the desk. Shelby is the head of science here. You can sit down and talk with her about any of your problems, from food to weight loss to training to athletics. It's a free conversation. We'll tell you about the science and how we can help you.
How about isometrics? What are your thoughts on that?
Isometrics are very specific. Isometrics are very useful because they spare the joint and the joint movement. But the strength gain is very specific to that angle. So if you do them at multiple angles, you can get some more strength throughout the whole range of motion.
Would it be sufficient for bone density?
It would be hard because you're not having continuous pull in the different angles of the muscle, perhaps. And also, there's certain things you just can't do isometrically. The movement creates this force. You know, it's your body going over distance over the ground, and how it's interacting with the ground, and how your muscles are tugging. So it's hard to do that isometrically.
There are certain things that isometrically you would do in nature. You would start every morning in an isometric position of squatting and relieving yourself, you know? And the reason I'm saying this, not really to be funny, but isometrics does have a role in human well-being, you know? So there are some points when you can use that in your conditioning, but it has some limitations. And neurologically, it also doesn't really develop that much when you're holding a certain position.
Yes, sir.
I'm sort of quantitative. Apologies if this is too quantitative, but if you know your base metabolic rate is at 1,500 calories a day, just pick a number, and your activity level, you're burning in a day 3,000 calories. Can you generalize about how many calories you want to target in terms of if the goal is fat loss while maintaining or ideally building
muscle mass? Yeah, I'll let Shelby take a crack at that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we're going to take into consideration. One is your current activity level. So something that we can actually tell with the VO2 test is how many calories you burn at each heart rate zone. So that's a really useful piece of information, because let's say the target is weight loss, then we can calculate a healthy net caloric loss in order to promote that while supporting the resting metabolism, so you're not going beneath that basal metabolic rate. Then we would want to change the percentages of the macronutrients that you're having on different types of days. For example, if you're doing weights one day, we're going to adjust the calories, but also how much protein you're having versus carbs and fats as well, because that has an effect on what your body's going to be utilizing as a fuel source. And the same exact thing with cardio. If you're doing a longer, low-intensity exercise, we're going to want to increase that fat intake because we want to teach the body to store or pull from that stored fat rather than carbohydrates.
And your question brings up the point I was trying to make. We can devise a high-intensity workout where you're burning 3,000 calories, or an endurance workout, and they're going to have totally different effects on your body. So yeah, you're burning the 3,000 calories, and my colleagues who swear by high-intensity training will say, Forster, we're burning as much fat as you're burning in your workout, but we're also burning all these carbs. My point to them is two. A, you're not teaching your body to prefer fats as a primary energy source, which is what we want all day long. And secondly, you can't do high intensity more than 8 to 10 weeks without blowing up. Or at least you're going to plateau. I've seen people do it. There are genetic freaks, so to speak, who do it, but they're not at their genetic potential either. Theirs might be super strong and super fit, and they do CrossFit every day, but I bet you if I put them on a periodization program, I'll get their weights beyond what they were doing, because they were constantly doing the same stress to high intensity. But bigger point is how you burn those 3,000 calories matters to how you're going to function the rest of the day. And that's a really good question.
I was exposed to some guys who, marathon runners, who after just 2 minutes of running, they were already utilizing really well their fat storages. I have also seen people who were able to move for 90 minutes continuously, really out of shape individuals who still did not utilize any of their fat storages. You know, so it is very individualized. When it comes to talking about health, well-being ideas, there's two different ways to talk about it. There is one general way to talk about nutrition and human beings, and then there is one specifically about you. When it comes to general nutrition, if you tell any advice to someone who has, let's say, an Inuit background, an Inuit person, the way how their digestive system works, 98% of their food intake will come from protein and fats. If you look at the Bantu African, they're about 60% of the meals, the food they eat is coming from vegetable sources. Now, both of them are incredibly capable human beings. You switch their diet, both of them are going to die in a heart attack in about 2 years, right? So, most importantly, we can talk about general ideas here. But what's good here at Facebook, what we can do is really focusing on you. What is going on with you right now? So instead of talking about these general lovely ideas, really can focusing on where are you right now? What do you need to do to get better at whatever you're trying to do?
Any other questions? There's no silly questions, so if you have anything bouncing around, just let us know. Go ahead.
I came here many years ago when I was getting ready for my first Ironman triathlon. And back then you were just blood lactate testing.
Yes.
Have you switched, or do you still do both? Or and what are the advantages of this?
Yeah, the VO2 test gives us more information. The lactate test is more specific, but again, we started to realize that the VO2 test tells us about calories you're burning per hour, and except for the elite athletes who need that razor, like the lactate testing is a little bit more sensitive, but they're not giving us any information on your calories. So, Shelby, if she gives you 7 hours of work, 4 on the bike and 3 on the run at certain heart rates, we can do the math and know exactly how many calories you're burning, how many calories you need to take in on those days. And then blood lactate doesn't give us any of that. So we realized that I think for elite athletes and the technology, if you see those handheld lactate testers, they're inaccurate exactly in the zone that we need to be accurate, which is the low level zone. That's where you figure out where those thresholds are, aerobic to anaerobic. So that's why we've gone to the VO2, it gives us more information. Yes?
How do you feel about keto?
Say again, keto?
Keto.
Well, basically we feel like if any diet has a name, it can't be right, because how can it be right for all of, look at this room, I see amazing diversity sitting right in front of me. I cannot believe it's good for this, and that person all together. We have been doing, carbohydrate restriction at certain times of your training. We match your diet to your training goals at each period of the periodization. When we're trying to make you into a better butter burner, a better fat burner, we're going to take out all the processed carbs and give you lots of healthy fats. You're going low intensity, you don't need those carbs, and we're going to tell your body to start learning how to use fats. When we add in intensity, hills and intervals, we got to add carbs back in your diet. We're not going to add processed carbs, we're going to try to get them from our vegetables. So keto to me, look, it's true, I just saw a study the other day. After 70% of your VO2 max, the keto athletes crash and burn. And those are athletes that were doing strict keto with scientists for 60 days. And then they did their VO2 test before and after, and over 70% they totally deteriorated. There's also doctors saying, it's not the right thing. Now, to contradict myself, I will tell you that the Mediterranean diet, that has a name, but it really describes more of a location in the world and the way people eat, has continually proven to be one of the best diet there when you look at longitudinal studies. So it's a lot of fresh, fish, a lot of vegetables, a lot of fresh food, olives, olive oil, a lot of healthy fats, and very little meat, maybe once or twice a week, so to speak. And we just see that across a lot of societies, that's producing the best longevity in life.
It's very interesting how much our society here in the Western world, and I can say Western world because I grew up in the East, how much everyone focusing on nutrition and how important that is. But people don't really think through that. If you don't really focus enough on resting and relaxation in your sleep patterns, it doesn't really matter what you eat, because as soon as you're not resting enough, you have stress hormone levels that elevate in your system, and one of the first things that shut down is your digestive system. Okay? Maybe not fully, but partially. So what happens when your digestive system partially shuts down? You can eat the best organic chicken that was running free, that the chicken has a name, but you eat it if your digestive system doesn't work properly because you didn't sleep properly and you didn't have proper resting. Good luck. You're wasting your money. Might as well you eat some, Kentucky Fried Chicken stuff, because neither of them is going to digest properly and they're all just going to corrode your whole system. Right? So there's an order of importance. Resting, relaxation is a really boring thing in a sense of like advertisement. Because if really people would be interested about health, they would say sleep better. When the light starts to go down, the sun going down, turn your light down. Try not to use lights. Don't use bright lights, you know, because all of those things messing with your circadian rhythms, you know. So people, when I tell them that, they're like, oh, you mean I need to go to sleep earlier than 11? I'm like, yeah, you gotta do that, yep. And then the best, if you just, when the sun goes down, you make sure that you don't really turn bright all of the lights. And make sure TV, you don't use it all the time. Don't use it 7 days a week, right? Pick certain days. I understand we need to be entertained and all that good, but you need to be very serious about your resting and relaxation, because that's everything where everything starts. And you know, just like, you know, Bob was talking about, that the best performers, they're really good resters and recovery masters. They're not the ones who are kicking ass all the time. The athletes who I worked with throughout the past years, the world-class athletes are world-class athletes because they are really smart about recovery. They are not always going to keep their own butt in every single training session, because that extra 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% that you give, it pushes your chances of injuring yourself, not just physically, but psychologically, and also maybe you dabbing into too much energy expenditure that's really hard to recover from. Smart athlete knows how to recover, and continuously they train. Okay?
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Mike.
Bob, what do you think is the role of massage in your training programs?
It's interesting. There's a whole school of thought now talking about manual therapy, massage, saying that all the effects are purely neuromuscular, mostly from the neurological system. We obviously know massage improves circulation, and we use it for recovery in a big way. But the big conversation is whether we are impacting connective tissue. That is the soft tissue that makes up our soft tissue skeleton, so to speak, gives our body shape, fascia, tendons, ligaments, and corresponding with that is this whole new concept of where pain originates. This very complex, you know, is it physiological, emotional, neurological, inflammation, and so these conversations intersect. I know for sure in certain instances how we are affecting connective tissue. So, to answer your question, the massage is really important. There's different types of massage, as you know. Mike's a massage therapist who worked with us as well in the past. I have a warm-up massage. When I see an athlete and I give them a massage before their competition or workout, it's my job to go to every muscle and make sure I hit it. There's that one muscle that got tight overnight because they slept in a funny position or they did something yesterday. That's the one that's going to go, and it can ruin their career or their season at least. So my job is to go through every muscle that's going to be working, make sure it's free and mobile. It does increase inflammation, circulation, but more importantly, I think it does neurological effects, relax muscles, and also connective tissue. You can manipulate connective tissue with deep tissue massage and make results. Our body's always trying to heal itself, so the connective tissue gets damaged, and then overnight it tries to heal, and then you work out again, and that's how you get functionally stronger tendons. So you can use your Achilles tendon, say, as an example, because it's visible and everyone knows it. Your Achilles tendon, if you're sedentary and we put you on a 12-week, 16-week training plan and measure your Achilles tendon, it's going to get fatter, bigger, and stronger. Where it attaches to the bone, what Csaba was talking about before, that bone is going to get stronger there. These are all the adaptations, which also brings up the need for first low-intensity exercise. It also, besides all the things we talked about, it hardens your body against injury by strengthening your tendons and your bones. So massage can be really good at breaking up the aberrant healing that goes on. Sometimes muscles develop, adhesions develop, you can feel them, they get strained, micro strains, that can then become a macro strain. So massage is also preventing those injuries, in my experience.
So massage is super important, but the best massage therapist needs to be always working with you. And you know, the best massage therapist, in my experience, is you yourself. So you need to be educating yourself continuously through someone who understands this. How can you become a massage therapist yourself? Because no one is going to be able to massage you the way you do yourself. So I use with my clients anything from a wrench, literally a giant wrench, because there are certain, things that can only be worked through with that, all the way to all the foam rollers and all of these different things, even wine bottles, believe it or not. It's really interesting. I just recently dealt with a soccer player who had an issue with his knee, and everyone with physio is working with him this way and that way, and everyone massaging. And I told him, all right, do you have a bottle of wine at home? And he was like, yeah. All right, okay, grab the edge of that bottle, which is really harsh, and then start working on certain aspect of your knee. And the next day we talked again, and he said that, you know what, it's really made a difference. I'm like, okay, good, so tell your physio, what your coach in Los Angeles told you to do is to grab a bottle of wine and fix it with that. You know, so, but you really need to use a lot of tools, and you need to learn to work on yourself.
The difference I see now between elite athletes today and when I started 40 years ago is when I go to the track now, they have a bunch of contraptions with them. They got our foam roller. We also make them a special massage stick. They have that. They have foam roller balls. So what I used to do for athletes, you know, we've made ourselves obsolete in that regard because they all know now they have to warm up their own body and then pre and post workout. So Shaba's point is well taken. You have to do your own maintenance. It's like these new stretch labs. How many people have heard go someplace and get stretched? It's like going someplace to brush your teeth. I mean, you got to stretch every day. I mean, it's just part of what we do to keep your joints working right and maintain full range of motion. So while you can go there a couple of times, like you can go massage a couple of times a month, and they'll help get over some humps, and you can go to the stretch lab and get some stretching. But if you're not brushing and flossing every day, your teeth are not going to do well. You can't rely on the dentist. And the same with your body.
And there is an order of importance what one should focus on. In my experience, people spend a tremendous amount of time focusing on and wasting their energy and time on the wrong things. There's some basic aspect of the human condition that needs to be, in my experience, focused on. For example, the very beginning of life, a human being has a very predictable way of evolving and developing. I call those the infant development movement. Not just me, but there is a few specialists out there who work with these infant development movements. Now, when I show these infant development movements for any athletes or anyone, they're usually like, what the heck are you doing, right? Essentially, learning at the very beginning of your life how to make a certain type of movements is the prerequisite for you to learn the next type of movements. And if you look at the baby, and I have 4 kids, one of them was just born 6 days ago, so I see these things frequently. That there's a very predictable way how they move. There's a certain time when they start to kind of wiggle around, and eventually they try to flip around, and eventually they push themselves up, and then get on hands and knees. And all of those things develop until the age of 4. You go through a very predictable pattern, you know, series. Now, at the age of 4, you will be basically a very capable human being that you can do pretty much everything an adult can do. You can jump, you can throw, you can run, do all those things, right? You're still not as good at it, but you can do everything. Now, when I start working with folks, I always analyze where are they, how are those patterns, those infant development patterns in their body. Most of the time, all of those infant development patterns, when I put them in position, they can't even move anymore. Because in natural circumstances, you would always replicate and keep redoing those infant development movements as part of your life by hunting, gathering, crawling, climbing, throwing, all of those things. Since we don't really do that, as soon as you go to school, you need to sit in the bench, you can't really scream, you can't climb, you can't throw, you can't do anything anymore, right? So many people never ever use them from age 4 on, those infant development patterns. So when I start working with folks, instead of focusing all of these really scientific stuff, I'm like, okay, let me see if you're able to crawl, not using your limbs just from one point to another. And until you can't do that, that means you can't generate force with your spine. If you can't generate force with your spine, what's going to happen? You're going to try to make it up at your shoulder, wrist, and elbow, right? Or your ankle, knees, and hips. So I can work on all of these injuries that you have, but if you don't generate your force with your spine, it's only a matter of time before you're going to recreate that kind of injury. So I focus on these things, you know, for example. There's a lot to the story, you know. So
It's been a real pleasure tonight talking with all of you. On that form in front of you, you can see you can check a box if you want a free injury eval at Forster Physical Therapy. We'll contact you and set that up. We'll consult here. We're going to contact Csaba. Give yourselves a big hand for coming out tonight.
And thank you very much for joining us online. And we're signing off. See you next time.